Okay guys, so I wanted to make a video on modern day mythology before the month was up, but I'll be honest, I didn't like the video I was working on. I just thought that I would need a lot more time to actually make my take in that video make any sense, and even then, I'm not completely sold on that take. So I decided that today's video would be about modern day mythology, but about more typical views on modern day mythology. So that's what this is. Modern day mythology. Yay. So when many people talk about modern day mythology, they talk about these comic books, superheroes specifically. And I'm not convinced. I don't think that's a very good argument, mainly because I've never really seen someone explain it apart from the superheroes are like gods and there are stories with a lot of different versions. And I mean, okay, sure, yeah, I can see that, but I don't think that's enough evidence to actually call them modern day mythology. And I think there's a pretty big hurdle in giving them that distinction, and that's that they're run by corporations. These are companies who control these characters. Sure, sometimes characters can switch from company to company, sometimes creators can own their characters, but for the most part they are run by businesses. Businesses I like, who make stuff that I enjoy, but businesses nonetheless. For me, a story needs to exist in a culture and be free from a specific dominating force. When I defined mythology at the beginning of the month, I talked about how it needed to be multifaceted, how it needed to serve multiple functions. And for the most part, these serve one function as entertainment, as art, as consumer product. But they don't do too much more than that. And that is not me trying to knock comic books. I love comic books. I just don't think that it is a good comparison to modern day mythology. And then some people point to religion as modern day mythology. But, you know, most of the world's religions, those mythologies are not modern day. They have existed for a long time, and they are not unique to our time. So I don't totally disagree with that idea, just I think we can do better. So is there a modern day mythology? Well, yeah, and I see it in two fronts. The first one, which was kind of what this video was supposed to be about, is characters in the public domain who have several different iconic versions and fulfill an idea of a concept. I was going to talk about Peter Pan, and I'm going to make that video later when I've thought over the argument a little bit more, but the idea being that he is a character that most people in America and Europe would know about. He is iconic mainly for one version, but there are several others. Also, you put on top of that, there's this idea of he is a representative for childhood. He is less of a character now, more of a concept. So I think you could argue that, although I'm not sold on it. The second, I think, can be more easily evidenced, and that is that our history is mythology. And this makes sense. After all, there is an idea that a lot of mythology is based on history. Altered history? Yes. History with a ton of willful beings piled on to explain natural phenomena? Yeah, sure. But it's still history. And when you look at characters from our past, like Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, you get these narratives built around them and they start to be romanticized and fable-sized. And I feel like eventually that gets to the point of mythologizing. These are real people. We still have very real facts about them, but as time goes on, we build these narratives around them and they become mythological. And of course you might be saying, Caleb, this can't be mythology because, we know that it's not true. Once again, I point you to the definition I made at the beginning of the month. Truth shouldn't really factor into this, but you should also consider that most of mythology never had a solid state. It was constantly in flux, it was constantly evolving. What we think of as Greek mythology from classical and Hellenistic Greece is really Mycenaean mythology. And Mycenia existed after this long dark age where we don't have records. Which means that for thousands of years, myths have evolved. And we like to kind of canonize them and stuff. But the truth is that that story was never always in that one state. You know, the story of Oedipus was never locked into Sophocles. And in that case, I would say our mythology, the mythologizing of actual historical figures, is very early on. And that it wouldn't be surprising to me if we hop into a time machine and we go 3,000 years in the future and we see those same characters altered by hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of their stories being retold. And you know, all of this is pretty speculative, so who actually knows? I can't get in a time machine and go 3,000 years. This may always be well-preserved history for all we know. The invention of the internet and certain documentation might make it so mythology doesn't exist in the future. I don't really believe that, but the point is that you can't really tell. After all, a culture's mythology is largely defined by the people who came after it and are looking back at it. So we might not ever be able to say what our modern mythology is. Or maybe just go back to the Greek definition of mythology. Mythology, it's words about stories. And in that case, a lot of things are modern day mythology when you think about it. I'll see you tomorrow, VEDS. May our stories outlive us all.